April 1940, Norway. German troops enter the country, and within weeks, military defeat turns into a system of control built on fear, arrests, and repression. As occupation settles in, Norwegian society fractures. While many people turn silently toward resistance, others choose collaboration, drawn by power, protection, or opportunity. German security services quickly learn that repression works best when betrayal comes from within, and they begin to rely on Norwegian traitors to identify, infiltrate, and destroy opposition. From this cooperation emerges a small but ruthless circle of collaborators who believe themselves protected by German authority and untouchable by law. Their work of deception, torture, and murder will scar the whole of Norway, including its resistance movements, and when the war ends, many of them will pay for their crimes with their lives. This group will become known as the Rinnan Gang. The Rinnan Gang was formally created in March 1942 as Sonderabteilung Lola, meaning Special Department Lola, and attached to the German SD, the Nazi security service responsible for intelligence gathering and political repression in occupied Europe during the Second World War, which started on the 1st of September 1939. This group was led by Henry Rinnan, a Norwegian who worked closely with German security officers. During post-war trials, Rinnan, who was recruited already in June 1940 by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, claimed that he was an SS officer. In reality, he was more of an intelligence agent, rather than a full member of the SS, the infamous Nazi paramilitary unit. At the end of the day, this distinction mattered little. Rinnan was granted wide freedom of action and ran his group according to his own rules with only one goal: to destroy the resistance. The Rinnan Gang's task was not to openly fight with the Norwegian resistance, but the slow destruction of resistance through infiltration, denunciation, terror, and torture. The group operated especially across the territory of central Norway. Henry Rinnan himself wanted to expand the activity of his gang also in Oslo, the Norwegian capital, but was prevented from doing so by his German superiors. Over the course of the war, around 70 Norwegians were involved in Rinnan's network, although the active core rarely exceeded 30 people at any given time. From 1943 onward, many members were former frontline fighters who had returned from German military service deeply shaped by violence, strict discipline, and ideological obedience, men accustomed to using force without restraint and mercy. Rinnan used in his activities also people who believed that they were serving the resistance cause, but in reality, they were deceived and worked for traitors and Nazi occupiers in destroying the Norwegian resistance. The Rinnan Gang quickly became infamous for brutality so extreme that even German officers sometimes intervened. On several occasions, the Gestapo demanded that a German officer be present during interrogations because they feared Rinnan or other members of his gang would torture prisoners to death before any useful information could be obtained. This alone revealed how far his methods went beyond what even the Nazi occupiers considered useful. In its early phase, the gang focused on identifying resistance members and reporting them to German liaison officers. Those denounced were arrested, interrogated, and usually sent to prisons or concentration camps such as Falstad in central Norway, while others were executed without trial. Families of the resistance fighters were left without explanations, and fear spread through workplaces and neighborhoods. As Rinnan proved himself effective and ruthless, he was also allowed to conduct interrogations himself, and the torture of his fellow citizens soon became routine work for him. Prisoners were beaten, threatened, deprived of sleep, and subjected to humiliation meant to destroy their dignity. Violence was not used only to extract information, but to break people completely, and to send a warning far beyond the interrogation room. The goal was domination and terror, and during the war several hundred Norwegians were tortured, and it is believed that the group killed more than 80 people. The most destructive weapon of the Rinnan Gang was infiltration. Members approached people they suspected of opposing the Nazi occupation under false names and identities. They presented themselves as resistance supporters, shared stories of hatred for the Germans, and gradually gained trust. They attended meetings, carried messages, and shared risks to appear credible. Over time, they collected names, addresses, courier routes, and meeting places. In some cases, they actively encouraged illegal actions against the Nazi occupiers, so that the arrests of the resistance fighters could later be justified with direct proof of their anti-German activity. This method allowed entire resistance networks to be dismantled from within. The result was devastating. Resistance groups that believed themselves secure were suddenly destroyed in coordinated arrests, often after months of careful manipulation and observations by the Rinnan Gang and Nazi security forces. From September 1943, the gang operated from its main headquarters at Jonsvannsveien 46 in the city of Trondheim. The villa was requisitioned by the Germans after the occupation, and its basement was converted into prison cells and interrogation rooms. Rinnan named the basement Bandeklosteret, meaning the Gang Monastery. Behind this mocking name stands a brutal reality. In the building, prisoners were isolated, beaten, and tortured. Interrogations were prolonged and deliberately cruel, stretching over hours or days. Several people died under torture in the basement. Hundreds passed through these rooms, many emerging permanently broken in body or mind. The house became one of the most feared places in occupied Norway, a symbol of what awaited those who were betrayed. One of the most infamous acts of brutality took place in March 1945, just a few months before the end of the war. A member of the gang, Hans Birger Egeberg, had tortured a resistance fighter for 36 continuous hours, with blows, whippings, and kicks. The victim was forced to roll in broken glass, and at one point, Egeberg seared a swastika into his back with a hot iron. Violence was not limited only to captured members of the resistance. The Rinnan Gang also murdered its own when they were seen as threats to their activities or to Rinnan himself. In December 1942, Bjørn Kristiansen was murdered because Rinnan feared he might defect, and his body was dumped in the Trondheimsfjord. Marie Nilsson, an experienced infiltration agent who had previously worked successfully for the Germans, came into conflict with Rinnan and was perceived as a rival. He was beaten to death and later found dumped at sea near the city of Ålesund in western Norway. In July 1944, Joralf Borgan, who internally opposed Rinnan, was shot 6 times, and his body was thrown into the sea outside Trondheim during an internal purge in the gang. These killings revealed the true nature of the organization. Loyalty offered no protection, and fear ruled inside the gang just as it ruled over its victims. The gang's actions deeply damaged resistance efforts across central Norway. Entire escape routes were exposed, including attempts to flee Britain by sea. Groups preparing to escape were infiltrated, arrested, and destroyed before they could act. Dozens of people were taken into custody, who never reached safety and instead died in captivity from abuse, illness, or execution. Families were left without answers, and communities learned that even trusted acquaintances, neighbors, or colleagues could be agents. The psychological impact was immense. Suspicion spread everywhere, and resistance work became even more dangerous and isolating. The Norwegian resistance did not remain passive. In December 1944, Ivar Grande, Rinnan's deputy commander and a central figure in interrogations and torture, was killed while he was cycling home by the Norwegian resistance. Yet by this stage, the Second World War was turning decisively against Germany and its allies, and panic began to spread inside the gang itself. As defeat approached, discipline collapsed. Finn Hoff, who had participated in executions of the members of the resistance during the war, took his own life on the 1st of January 1945. In May 1945, as part of the gang attempted to flee towards Sweden with hostages, Carl Dolman and Ingeborg Skjevik, his fiancée, committed suicide when they were surrounded by the Norwegian resistance. On the 26th of April, 1945, Maria Arends, who previously worked as a courier for the Rinnan Gang, was killed in the gang headquarters when she and her boyfriend, Bjorn Bjornebu, attempted to escape the gang and flee to Sweden. The killing of its own members, carried out when German defeat was already inevitable, showed how far the group had fallen. Eliminating witnesses and maintaining control mattered more than survival itself. When the Second World War ended in Norway in May 1945, surviving members of the Rinnan Gang were arrested. Some were captured while attempting to flee, others were discovered in hiding. All of them were accused of treason, and trials that followed in 1945 and 1946 exposed the full extent of infiltration, torture, and murder carried out by members of the gang under Nazi occupation against the resistance movement. Testimonies which described beatings, psychological abuse, and killings shocked Norwegian society, and in reaction they demanded that it was necessary to deal with traitors and active agents of the Nazi security forces. Legal proceedings against the group unfolded in 1945 and 1946, resulting in 7 life terms and 12 death verdicts, 2 of which were later commuted to life imprisonment. 10 men: Henry Rinnan, Bjarne Jenshus, Aksel Mare, Harry Rønning, Harry Hofstad, Olaus Hamrun, Per Bergen, Christian Randal, Harald Grytte, and Hans Egeberg were executed. Executions were carried out at the Kristiansten Fortress in Trondheim, which became a symbol of post-war justice. Henry Rinnan himself was executed there on the 1st of February 1947. The legacy of the Rinnan Gang remains one of the darkest chapters in Norwegian history, and it demonstrated how occupation, ideology, and personal ambition could turn ordinary people into brutal instruments of terror.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.